Have you ever wondered if being gorgeous might cause problems in a relationship? That was something I never considered, until now. My wife made a surprising confession. She believes she is too attractive to be faithful. At first, I didn't know how to respond. Was this a joke? Is this a plea for attention? Or was there anything else going on? But before we get started, make sure you subscribe. I am working toward a target of 1,000 subscribers, which is only feasible with your aid. Let's get started. My wife, a 34-year-old female, and I, a 35-year-old male, have known each other since high school. I had just moved to a new town, so high school was entirely new for me, and I was worried that I would have difficulty adjusting, which is understandable. Fortunately for me, things weren't that bad, and it was because I could make friends quickly, so I didn't stand out like a sore thumb. Among the friends I made back then was a girl named Melissa, a member of the school's photography club. I met her when she was taking pictures near where I was sitting. The next thing I knew, I was the subject of one of her photos, which she still claims is one of her favorite photos of all time, but I always doubt it. I hate that I'm writing this right now because it's taking me back to our earliest memories, and it hurts so much to think that all of this will soon mean very little to me. Back on track, we became good friends after that, and in our senior year, we went from friends to partners. It felt right, and even though we each went to college in different states, it didn't harm our relationship. We were sending a lot of emails and text messages. Melissa, a professional photographer, has worked as the official photographer in several incredible places throughout her career. This has sometimes taken her out of the country or to other states, but that has never been a problem for me. We eventually got married 10 years ago. Time flies. As I matured, it became easy to recognize how beautiful Melissa was. Back then, I might have thought she was cute, but it wasn't the only reason I ended up befriending her and eventually dating and marrying her. It was all her personality, but now I realize I was blessed with a beautiful person. The only problem with dating someone attractive is that you need to be secure. Let's say that I wasn't safe at the start of our relationship because it always felt like other men were a step away from taking my girl and having her cheat on me. But she was extremely reassuring and open in the early years, so I stopped worrying about who she worked with and all that jazz afterward. As we've gotten older, I've noticed that my wife began to change. Not necessarily negatively, but in a mild midlife crisis. She began to worry a lot more about legacy, and despite never wanting children, we must have had about 10 conversations where she was second-guessing the decision and asking me if I thought she should freeze her eggs. Initially, I said no, but I knew it wasn't just a random you by the third time we talked about it. When she started going to the gym, I assumed it was because she was afraid of getting out of shape and looking old. She still looked beautiful to me, but there's probably no reason to discourage someone from going to the gym because it will only help them in the end, so I just embraced the change. I've always been active. I run a lot and cycle, so it made me happy. However, the real problem began when she began to hang out with some of the women she met at the gym. She told me all about them, and while one was married and a millennial, the other two were unmarried and in their early 20s. There isn't anything intrinsically wrong with being friends with people much younger than you, but the problem was that they started to hang out in stereotypically young ways. My wife, who usually liked to drink wine, read a book or watch a movie, talked about going bar hopping, hitting the club, and having all kinds of girls' nights out. Initially, I didn't think it'd be a habit, so I encouraged the first and second times, and even the third if I recall correctly. But then I realized it would become an almost weekly thing, which I didn't like. A married woman should only participate in some nighttime activities with her husband because very little good can come from it. And I'm not a wimp of any kind. So when I realized that those outings would become a regular thing, I had to put my foot down and tell her to stop. As much as I trusted her, I was starting to worry about the kind of things those environments would expose her to, and I didn't know those gym girls well, so I had no idea about their lifestyles and whether that would negatively impact Melissa. Considering how much she had embraced going out and hanging out, it didn't go well with her, and the whole thing devolved into a messy argument. I'm not proud of it, but I told her she was going through a midlife crisis, And she told me I was a controlling, insecure a-hole. I couldn't get it out of my head because I had a strong feeling that something was going to happen, even though she had told me she wouldn't go out that night. When she returned later than usual, she avoided me, took a shower, and went to bed. She was sleeping when I entered the room. I couldn't stop thinking, knowing I was acting paranoid, but I decided to swipe her phone while she was sleeping. I had never done that before, but it seemed like the best time to take that risk, and I'm so glad I did. After unlocking my wife's phone, I went to Messenger, where she primarily communicates, and I saw a 4-person group chat called Fit and Fierce. I cringed as much as you would, but I didn't have much time to process my cringe because the messages were something else. I mean, any group chat made public probably can send people to jail, but apart from how lewd they were all being in there, including my wife, one message that she sent caught. It was from that night. I felt bad at first, but when I walked in and saw him, I stopped caring. He's attempting to dominate the wrong person, and truthfully, I'm too attractive to be faithful. I've been tied down to him my entire life, and have never had the opportunity to exploit my attractiveness in the manner that most women do. Let me gain attention. Let me receive favors. The other girls in the group encouraged her by asking if he was hot and big. The way I felt, I hate to even think about it, is still so strong in my memory, even though it happened over a week ago, and it just gives me this tight pain in my chest. It felt like everything crumbled around me. I thought her going out would be one of those minor inconveniences in a marriage that we'd eventually settle and return to our normalcy. Still, I never expected it to be the end of the marriage. I've known this person for 20 years, and while I was having a great time being married to her, she felt stuck, which was devastating. But that's just me being a sap, because all of her text messages indicated that she had cheated on me. She was unapologetic about it, and she was probably going to do it again. I'm assuming that night was the first time she cheated on me, but it could have happened earlier in our relationship. This kind of lady regretted not having a hoe phase. Staying with one man in an amicable relationship since her adolescence was more of a punishment than a prize for her. Is this how most of them think? I'm so bewildered. My mood was off the next day, but she didn't bother to ask, likely because our fight was still lingering. That night, I grabbed evidence from her phone, including additional messages in which she described how everything happened, how good it was, and how she couldn't even remember his name. She then laughed a lot, as if that was something to be proud of. I was so broken, and I still am. So this is where I am right now. I know I can't go anywhere with this kind of person. I've already given up way too many years of my life, but I need to hurt her. I don't want to cheat back because I'm more significant than that. I left 10 years of marriage spotless and will keep it that way. But I need to hurt her. I don't want to be the bigger person any longer. Part of me regrets going this way because my life is about to get very complicated in the next few months, but this is one of those circumstances where I have to accept short-term discomfort to be better off in the long run. I confronted Melissa about this whole mess once I knew enough about what she was doing. I waited for her to return home one night, and she tried to head straight for the shower, but I stopped her. It was clear she didn't want me to get too close to her, but I could smell alcohol on her breath and what appeared to be male perfume. She kept shrinking away from me, and when I asked her what was up, she just said nothing. I'm not sure why that answer irritated me so much. Maybe because I'd spent the last week killing myself with anxiety, stress, and paranoia, and to her it was as if nothing was happening. But that's when I told her straight up that I knew she was cheating on me. Boy, I unleashed everything I'd been holding back on her. I quoted her line asking if she genuinely thought she was too beautiful to be faithful. I wondered if she genuinely felt like she wasted her prime on me. I asked why she wanted a hoe phase so badly. I told her that I was right, that she was having a midlife crisis, and that she had single-handedly destroyed our marriage. At least she would finally get the chance to be free and do everything she wanted. Throughout everything, she just stared at me and said nothing. Then, out of nowhere, she started wailing, as if she finally realized that the risk she had been taking was not worth what was about to happen to her. She wanted to eat her cake and have it too, just like every other cheater, but I refused to let that happen. She sank to the floor, and I just stood over her, throwing insult after insult. Honestly, there was so much anger in me that I had to let it all out. I didn't want to be physically violent, but I knew nobody could stop me from saying what I needed to say. At the end of it all, I told her to pack her things and leave, but she was still crying on the ground, so I went into the room and started throwing some essentials into a suitcase for her. It was about 90% done when she crawled in and threw herself at my feet, but I shook her off. It wasn't enjoyable to me. I had to call an Uber, which I set to go to her mom's place, and I put her things in the car. Only then did she reluctantly leave. A few days later, I made sure she was served with divorce papers at her mother's house, and then I had to deal with a slew of calls, none of which I answered because I didn't have anything to say to her or her mother, certainly not now. At this point, I'm just waiting for the divorce proceedings to begin and then end to put this entire episode behind me. I never thought I'd end up divorced, but life sure comes at you fast. All I need now is to make sure I genuinely screw her over. I've been hurt, but I need to make sure she feels far more pain than I do, and I certainly won. The relief I feel now that this is all over is difficult to convey, but honestly, I feel terrific. Let me attempt to explain what happened without boring you. Eventually, we had to go through divorce proceedings, which wasn't fun. Melissa became very resentful after all the wailing and crying she did, and it seemed like her whole goal at that point was to make life as difficult for me as possible. She'd send me text messages in the middle of the night, threatening me and talking about how I ruined her life. In one case, security cameras recorded her parked across the street at 3 a.m. Instead of negotiating a reasonable settlement, she and her sleazy lawyer demanded outrageous sums of money to compensate her after such a lengthy marriage. The only problem was that I knew I wouldn't be paying anything. I'd always been good with my money, so my savings had been ample for a long time. When I knew the divorce was coming, I spent a lot of time working with my lawyer to find creative ways to make my money inaccessible to her. Of course, I couldn't get it all out of the way, but we were able to store a good amount safely. However, I wasn't only interested in safeguarding my money, I wanted to grab as much of hers as possible. She'd worked as a photographer for a long time, and not just on a modest scale. She had money. She always had, and I didn't mind being greedy. Using the evidence I had, which demonstrated her admission of guilt and lack of remorse, I was hoping not only to get a sizable sum from her, but also to have her pay my legal fees. This was requested from the start, and her harassment was documented. She hadn't been thinking ahead when she parked outside my house in the middle of the night. I knew I was going to make her regret every single move she made after cheating on me. When we found out which judge would be assigned to the case, my lawyer relaxed, saying things were about to go our way because the judge was hard but fair. With the evidence of her adultery, harassment, lack of remorse, and even her ludicrous requests in an attempt to separate amicably, the judge handed us pretty much everything we asked for, leaving Melissa with very little. She kept her car, which she later sold. Honestly, it felt very, very good. She had never been one to save, so she emptied quickly, especially since I preferred a lump sum over alimony. It dried her out. I know she won't be broke for long, but she'll have a much harder time living for the time being. After all of the harassment and insults, she tried to phone me drunk a few nights after the divorce was filed, telling me how much she missed me and how her life was so bad now. I let her rant because it was entertaining, but I just hung up in the end. I'm on the high ground right now, and it feels so good because I did nothing to deserve to be cheated on. Now it's her turn to feel the pain, and I hope she takes a lesson with her. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, remember to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your stories and opinions. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell to never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.